Okay friends, it's time to get started on our job. One of the first things you want to do is carefully come over to your radiator cap and make sure that it's nice and cool to the touch. After that, turn it counterclockwise, lift it up, inspect it, set it aside. Now from underneath the driver's side front of the vehicle, let's come right over to the lower aspect of the radiator. We're going to go ahead and turn this little petcock right here, and the fluid's going to come draining out. Make sure you have a nice collection bucket, hand and eye protection at all times. Let's let this fully drain. The next thing that we're going to do is come right over here to the radiator hose where it connects onto the radiator. Go ahead and grab onto this clamp, we'll slide it up a little bit and pop this right off. Inspect that hose, make sure it's nice and soft and pliable. Now typically if you wanted to, you could leave it just like this and just kind of set it off to the side, but what you're going to find is it just keeps on flopping over, so I'm just going to go ahead and take off the other side as well. Same process. Set this aside. Now we can move along to removing the reservoir from this area. Just come right over, grab onto that hose, we'll give it a little twist, inspect it, set it aside. Now we can continue on to our two 10mm headed bolts. There's one here, one right over here. Remove the reservoir. Moving along, we're going to come right over towards the driver's side. You're going to find your power steering reservoir. Remove this 8mm headed bolt. Go ahead and grab onto that reservoir. We're going to carefully set it aside, making sure that we're not spilling out any of our fluid. Now we can start removing the top area of our fan shroud. You're going to find one 10mm headed bolt right on the passenger side, and then the same thing over on the driver's side in the same area. Remove the pair. Once you have both those bolts out, go ahead and follow that fan shroud down along the side. You're going to find two mounting points on each side. For these, what you want to do is just use some long nose pliers. We'll give this area a little squeeze and then we'll gently lift up. Do the same on the other side. Set the fan shroud aside. Now it's going to be time to make our way back underneath the driver's side of the radiator here. We'll go ahead and close off this petcock. This is going to help prevent it from dripping while we continue. Now let's move along to these two lines right along here. To remove these, all you want to do is just go ahead and grab onto these. Sometimes you can give them a little twist to pop them off. Otherwise, you might just have to give it a loving bonk to break it free. Let's go ahead and turn that, twist it off, inspect it, we'll set it aside. Now that I got that one off of there, I'm going to leave this just like this. We'll continue on to doing the same with the other line right here. Just go ahead and pop off that gray piece. Now we can go ahead and take our nice collection bucket. We're going to put it underneath both of these lines right here to collect any of this fluid for recycling. Now we're going to have to use a tool that looks just like this. Essentially, we're going to go ahead and open it up, put it right up and around this line right here. We'll go ahead and press it into the radiator, and that's going to help separate this area. Let's go ahead and press it right into here, as far as you can. All right, I'm just going to work my tool around on this. Now at this point, I'm just going to carefully start pulling on this a little bit and twisting at the same time and see if we can remove it from the radiator. Now let's just go ahead and do the same to the other one. Now that we have those lines off and they're fully drained, let's continue on to this hose right here. Make sure you have a coolant collection bucket underneath this that's separate from the oil. Now that we have our lines and our hoses off the bottom, let's continue on by removing the lower aspect of the fan shroud. You're going to find two 10mm headed bolts. There's one on the passenger side that I'm going to remove, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing on the driver's side. Now before we can continue on by pulling this out, now that the bolts are out, we're going to come right over here to where the hose goes into this. I'm going to carefully get in between the bracket for the hose and the fan shroud and gently pry it away. There we are. Now that we have that separated, let's carefully try to pull this down and out of here. Now that we've finished on the other side, let's continue on the front area of this. We're going to go ahead and pop out all 4 of these push pins. I'll just use my fork tool for this. Now that we have that separated, let's reach in up in here. We're going to go ahead and grab onto this plastic piece. You're going to find that it has a little tabs, so I just want to go ahead and grab onto it. I'll pull it down like this to separate it. Set this aside. Now the next thing we want to do is go ahead and follow this oil cooler line up to where it connects onto this plastic shroud right here. I'm just going to use a long pry bar. I'll come up and in between this area, but you can also just reach right up there and pull it off. Now back up on top of the truck, we're going to get right over here to each side of the radiator. You're going to find a 13mm head. Let's go ahead and loosen up this one. We'll take it right out, and then we'll do the same on the driver's side. Now the next thing that we're going to want to do is get in between the radiator and the AC condenser itself, and you're going to be able to find 2 10mm headed bolts. There's one located on the passenger side that you can see right here, and then there's one in the same position on the driver's side. Let's go ahead and loosen those up. We'll remove them using a magnet. Let's come over to the driver's side here. We're going to get right in between this area and try to separate this. There we are. Once that's out of the way, let's go ahead and start removing these bolts right here. Once again, there's one on the driver's side and the same on the passenger side. Now we can go ahead and start moving this away from the front here, and we're going to start removing this area right across the front. To do this, I'm going to carefully grab along here, and I'll gently start pulling it and twisting it. There we are. Pop that right off of there. Come over here, do the same. Get this out of the way. Now we can start separating the AC condenser from this plastic assembly. Down all the way at the bottom, you can tell that the AC condenser is sitting down into it. So I'm going to carefully try to grab onto this AC condenser, and I'm going to gently start lifting it up and away from the plastic. Now that we have this nice and loose, let's continue on to the fan. We have to start removing the fan, so we're going to have to remove the fan clutch from the water pump itself. To do that, we're going to come right over to this electrical connector. There's a red tab. You want to go ahead and pull this up. That's going to unlock it. After that, we'll squeeze it and then lift this up and off. Now we're going to pop this out of place. Lift this up and out of the way. Now you can go ahead and spin this into any position you need to, so you can get your 36mm fan clutch tool on here. Go ahead and spin this counterclockwise. Lift this up and out. Now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and try to twist this a little bit. We're going to start trying to lift it up and out of here, but what you're going to find is over on the driver's side, you have this ABS unit that's kind of in the way a little bit. So by twisting this, what our hope is that we can pull it out in a way far enough that we can lift this straight up and out. Now at this point, we can start removing these plastic brackets. To do that, I'm just going to go ahead and tilt it towards the rear aspect of the radiator and then remove it, just like that. We'll do the same on the driver's side of the radiator. Tilt it, remove it. There it is, friends. On the original radiator, we need to continue on by removing all of these metallic clips that come across. To do that, we'll just use a nice small pocket screwdriver. I'm going to carefully try to get underneath and in between this area here, and then we'll gently pry. Carefully pop this up. Let's get over to the new radiator. Now we can take our clips. We're going to get ready to install these on the brand new radiator. We have the two smaller clips. Those are going to be the center clips. So you've got one right here. Go ahead and take that. You're going to notice it has a little bobble. We want that facing down. Slide it right in position. Do the same on this one with the bobble facing down. And now we can do each side. For these, what you want to do is just have that little bobble facing inward towards the radiator. Now at this point, we're going to continue on to putting on our plastic pieces. For this, we're just going to do it in the opposite way that we removed them. So I'm just going to go ahead and tilt the radiator. We'll get this kind of in position and then tilt it in. Now at this point, we can go ahead and grab onto our mounting bolt. We'll just go ahead and start that in there a little bit, but leave it loose so it can still move around. Let's do the same to the other side here. Just go ahead and get it lined up. Get it in position. Start that in there as well. Let's get ready for that installation. We'll go ahead and carefully slide this in. I know I've already said it, but be very careful for that AC condenser. You don't want to mess up the fins. Out of the way. It's going to drop down. This side. There we go. Get this close to being in position, then we'll grab that AC condenser, mount it up on here as well. Now what you're going to want to do is go ahead and take out those top bolts so the radiator is separate from the plastic. Essentially, I just want to go ahead and try to pull the radiator away so I can slip my hand down in here. Then we're going to take these two bolts. We're going to go ahead and start them in down here on the areas where the AC condenser is supposed to meet up with the plastic. So what I want to do is just go ahead and grab onto that plastic and the AC condenser. I'll bring them both so they're close together. We'll start in both of these bolts, leave them loose, and then we'll continue. All right, I've got that one started in. Now I'll do the same on the other side of the vehicle. Now to snug these, what you're going to want to do is go ahead and grab onto the plastic pieces, and we're going to go ahead and try to push this right up against the AC condenser as far as we can. And now we'll snug them up. There's that one. Do the same to the other. Now let's pay attention to this area down along the side of the plastic housing. We want to make sure that it's sitting up on the ridge where it needs to. So go ahead and grab onto it. We're just going to carefully lift it up, press it up against towards the front of the vehicle here so it's sitting on the ridge. You can tell it's on the grommet. Do the same on the other side. And then after that, we'll go ahead and start in the mounting bolts for this. We don't necessarily need to tighten them up yet, but we do want to start them. Now let's get under the vehicle. From underneath, let's have a look at the areas where the AC condenser is supposed to sit down in the plastic. Just ensure that it is sitting into the proper areas. If it isn't, you need to climb back up top, loosen everything up, and readjust. This looks good, so we can continue. Now we can grab this piece right here. We're going to go ahead and put it right up and over. You can tell where the mounting holes need to line up. And you also have this square cutout that needs to line up with this latch. Press it in, listen for a click. Now we can take this plastic piece, we're going to bring it right up. Essentially, I just want to bring it right up into the center here, push it into position. And now we're going to start lining up our push clip holes with the areas on the radiator down here. Now we'll take our push pins, we can start those right in. Make sure this is secure. Now let's make our way up into the passenger side right along that plastic, and we're going to reattach that hose. I just want to go ahead and line up the push clip bracket. We'll slide it right in, make sure it's secured. Let's get this lower aspect of the fan shroud back in here now. Go ahead and start in both of those bolts. Once they're started, snug them up. Let's get the lower radiator hose on here. Make sure it's bottomed out directly up against the radiator. You don't want it hanging off because it could potentially come off under pressure. Make sure you line that up into the original position as when you removed it. Give it a nice tug to make sure it's secure. Let's get this remounted as well. Now we're going to go ahead and wipe off our line from any existing debris that might be on it. I always add a tiny bit of lubricant inside this area. It just helps kind of slide the line right in. There we are. I got a little click. I'm going to give it a tug to make sure it's secure. And now we can grab our plastic lock and slide it on. Looking at the plastic lock, you can tell that you have the skinnier ends, and then you also have the wider ends. We want to make sure that we have the skinny end fitting up inside this area of the radiator on the fitting, and then bring it right up and along the line. After that, you can press this on. If you have trouble squeezing it, you can just use some pliers to get it on there. There we are. Give that a little spin just to make sure that the line's sitting completely in there. You can see that it has this little nub on it. That needs to be on the area closest to the radiator. That way this can do its job. Give it one last tug to make sure it's secure, and then do the same to the other one. Before we get back up top, let's come down here and just double check that petcock. You want to make sure that it's nice and tight. Sometimes they loosen up during shipping. All right, now back up top, let's go ahead and get this piece back in there. You want to make sure that you have it in this position, so this flat area is facing down, and then you have this area with a little cutout facing straight up. After that, let's go ahead and carefully push on this radiator assembly, and we're going to start lining this up with its mounting position right down here. You can see the little clippy-do. Let's go ahead and press this down inside there, and then we'll lock it in. Yeah. So I've got this locked in. I'm going to follow it all the way over, do the same on the other side. Okay, now that I have both these sides locked in, I can go ahead and carefully pull this up against here and start snugging it up. Let's grab the bolts for these side plates. I'm going to start them both in. Once they're both started, we can snug them up. That one's nice and tight. Now let's go ahead and do this one, and then we'll do the same on the other side. Let's carefully get the fan in here. Just going to line it up with the water pump pulley here. We'll start screwing it on. Just be very careful not to drop it and ruin your brand new radiator. Now let's use our fan clutch tool. Give this a couple taps to lock it in. Now let's start reattaching the wiring for this. I'm just going to come right here. We'll latch this in. Connect in the wiring, of course. Listen for a click. Give it a tug. Make sure it's secure. Lock it in. Okay, everything's nice and tight here. Let's go ahead and grab onto that upper fan shroud. Now we're going to have to slide this upper fan shroud down onto the lower one. We have these little pitons that stick out. You want to make sure those line up, and then right up along this side on both sides of the vehicle. Let's go ahead and carefully slide this down. We'll get it into position. Once it feels as though both sides are semi-lined up, we can press it down to lock it in. Okay. Now let's put in our side bolts for this. Now let's get this back on here. Pay attention to the lower aspect. You have this little nub. It needs to fit into the hole that's in the fan shroud. Get it in position. We'll start the bolt in, snug that up as well. Let's go ahead and get this lined up, press it into position. Now we can get our upper radiator hose on here. If you're using your original hose, you can see that it's marked. One side says RAD for radiator, and the other side will say ENG for engine. Let's go ahead and get this into position. We'll slide it onto the radiator, all the way up against so it bottoms out. We'll also put this side onto the thermostat housing. And now we can start putting our clamps into position. Okay. Now once you have it so it's clamped down, just go ahead and double check to make sure it's in the proper position. Now we'll just do the same on the radiator side, and then we can move along. Now we can go ahead and get this back on there. Have a look at this lower aspect. That needs to fit right into the fan shroud down here. Slide that down. Now we're going to line up both of our bolt holes. We'll start those in, snug it up, and then we'll do this hose. Now, since we had to remove the oil cooler lines from the bottom of the radiator, you're going to want to come right over to your oil dipstick. Go ahead and pull this out, inspect it, and make sure you still have plenty of oil. If you need to add some, use a little bit of 530 oil until you're up to your maximum line. Now at this point, we're going to go ahead and apply some vacuum to this. The reason why I want to apply vacuum is for two reasons. First of all, I'll be able to check to see if I have a leak anywhere. Aside from that, by applying vacuum to this, it's going to help be able to draw the fluid into this, and I don't necessarily have to worry about air in the system. Otherwise, if you wanted to and you only had something like this is a funnel buddy, and essentially it has some adapters in there. That's going to make it so you can bleed out the air in the system as well and fill it. I'll set this aside and let's get this started. We're going to watch this gauge right here, and we want it to come all the way up and into the green. Now at this point, I've had vacuum on this for a short while, and I can see that the needle pretty much stopped. It's in the green zone, and it's past the 25 PSI. So what I want to do is just go ahead and turn this off so I can hold pressure. And now we're just going to make sure that this doesn't fall. That's going to help ensure that, like I said before, we don't have a leak. If this needle happens to drop all the way into the yellow, or even worse, into the red, I know I have a leak somewhere. Let's let this sit for a minute, and then we'll continue by adding. Okay, so it's been holding pressure, so let's go ahead and add the manufacturer's specified fluid. You want to make sure that it's pre-mixed 50-50 diluted. Okay friends, we got the car all back together. What's left to do now? Now you're just going to want to go ahead and start it up. You need to let it run for a little while. Essentially, we want to wait until we can feel some heat coming out of those vents, and we also want to wait until we can hear that cooling fan turn on. After that, you should know that you have all the air burped out of the cooling system, and at that point, you can go ahead and take this right off the top. We're going to go ahead and make sure that you fill up that overflow tank. You want to have it at least up to the maximum line on that, and then after you're all done all that, you're going to go ahead and put on your radiator cap, take it for a road test. Thanks for watching.